Hey everybody, good morning. Brian Raisin coming at you live today from downtown Xenia. It's before 7 a.m. and on a Monday morning. The town's just waking up, but it's such a great little town. And today I'm here because it's really germane to our topic. I'm talking about building a base of support in your program planning process. And so what's that about? What does that mean in a town like this where we do a lot of our programs, whether you're extension like me or working at a nonprofit or even a small business? And if you're in a city or an urban environment, you're likely working in a neighborhood. Maybe it's a school if you're an educator. Again, the nonprofit maybe is focused on one section of that urban city. And so anyway, let's jump in and talk about building a base of support for your programs. All right. So first of all, of course, I've got my camera in the way. All right. So it's absolutely critical for program success. We're going to talk about each one of these as we go through. Support from people and groups, the organization, and then the wider community, particularly boards. And I'm going to fly through this really quickly. It's nothing magic or that exciting, but I've got a couple of examples just to share to get you thinking a little bit about it. So bottom line, people support. When you're building a new program of any kind, you've got to have support from potential participants, not just current informer, because they will help you inform and do your evaluations and figure out what you need, formative evaluation, summative evaluation. But potential may give you some direction or ideas that you haven't done before in that program, enhancing it, making it better. We talked about that 2 lectures ago, I think. Mid-level and senior managers, administrators, I'll tell you more about this in just a minute. Other stakeholders with vested interests in the process. Professional organizations, advisory committees, community groups, funding agencies. In a word, diversity. This is pretty obvious stuff, but it's easy to leave somebody out. And then you're sitting there going, oh man, I wish we had somebody on our planning team who knew about X or who was linked to the money, or you know what I'm saying. All right, here's a good chart. You can see this in your book, Caffarella and Daffron. So take a look. It's just before, during, and after. It talks about activities for participants and how they fit into, and how you can then use that information to assess or to help you plan, germane to the class, where you're going. Immediate supervisors. So don't miss this. Sometimes if you're a program planner, you're kind of in the middle of an organization. I've been a training manager at a large Fortune 500. And let's just say we're not the highest up the totem pole, or the ladder, excuse me. We're not always seen in the best light. It depends on what senior management wants, but you've got to get this intermediate level of supervisors because you will have challenges for personnel if your supervisors don't support the educational program. So that's big. They will push back, especially if it's mandatory. And you've probably been in, or I promise you will be in, an organization where you've got to do some mandatory training class. Oh my gosh. So that support's really needed. Enough. Mid-level, senior level managers. It can take longer for senior executives to take notice. So you've got to hook in again to that mid-level management. So think about programs that we teach. A lot of times, my work in community development with Extension is building capacity. That's different from content delivery. My sister is a SNAP or FNAP educator. So she is doing content delivery for low resource audiences down in Scioto County. She's much smarter than me too, by the way. Anyway, but she's also building capacity in those folks. So just think about where you are, what your focus is, and how you can get the support, again, from mid to senior level management. Other stakeholders, now we're stepping outside a little bit of the organization. Other professional organizations, advisory boards, planning committees. I'll talk about a few of these in a little more depth. But the purpose is that they help facilitate your needs identification, your assessment, your analysis. What? You've heard of this before? Yes, because these are the steps involved in program planning. Organizational support. How is the program positioned in the organization? What's your culture? What is it? Tim Kite Organizational culture eats your strategic plan for lunch. We'll talk about that later in the semester. Is there commitment? Action involves having people at all levels support it through resource allocation and actual involvement. In other words, if you're told by your boss to go put on this plan, do they give you the funds, the time, and then do they involve themselves? Will they come and introduce it? So anyway, getting to your why. So go back to the your purpose of the program. If you can drive back to that, sometimes even a reluctant boss or a very busy supervisor, and God bless them, people are busy, you can pull them in, and that can be really critical for getting the involvement of the others who are perhaps mandated to come to a training program. And again, I'm talking more internal training stuff right now. Structural support. How central is training and education to your organization? Is it a Fortune 500 Chief Learning Officer? Is it an educational institution or government agency? Some of those have those. So just, again, things to think about in the background. How about the wider community? Advisory committees. These can get tricky. They can be really fun, but they can also be a little tricky and testy. We've all seen that. Let's go through some of these really quickly. So advisory committees is not a legally or binding group. They're just formed to advise you about the direction or the outcomes. They provide assistance in understanding context, which is absolutely critical. I talk about it all the time. Knowles, 1984, andragogy, adult learning theory. The context is everything. So they can help bring that into our program, particularly for adult audiences. And I'm going to go down to high school age or adults. Not all high school kids, but a lot are really into the point where, why do I need to know this? Versus younger ages in pedagogy where you're just giving information and content. If you've used an advisory committee for years, think about this. Revisit the mission. Bring them back to that so that they remember the why and then can get off of the side conversations and get to the main point, because we all do that. We drift. So that's a critical piece to walk through that again, to have them practice giving an elevator speech. That's a fun thing to do with an advisory committee. Have them practice doing a bucket list for your organization or for your program. What would be the ultimate outcomes? Those things can be very engaging for an advisory committee and help them refocus, so then you can either redo your program, finish doing your program, or reorient it to make it viable again. Perhaps you're working on a program that has lost some steam or something like that. 4 reasons. They help shape the specific features of your program. They draw attention when judgments are made that determine. You remember we talked about power. Was that this class or is that 8420? It's this class. Anyway, my brain. Who makes the decisions on what information is included? Pedagogy of the oppressed. Read, please read. Who makes the judgments on who are invited to the programs, et cetera, on what readings we assign? Do we diversify those, or do we use the same old white men that we've used for years? Sorry, I'm on a soapbox. They draw attention to functional, social, and political characters of that educational program. Things also to think about, looming in the background, but really important when you go to delivering those. And then they connect technical, political, ethical domains of planning. So have you included the right people on your advisory committee? For example, does your agricultural committee, your agricultural advisory committee include urban neighbors? Why might you need to do that? Yeah, we know the answer to that. Okay, so you got me. Legally constituted. Now, boards are very different. With boards, you are, like, your name's on the line. They are binding. Members are accountable, not just to the mission, but fiscally accountable. So if you have agreed to be on the board of directors for some organization, my question, do they have liability insurance? Do they provide that for you? $1 to $3 million per board member. I say no to a lot of boards. Well, 1, because I don't have time. But 2, there's a legally binding responsibility there you really need to think through. A challenge for program planners, clarifying their responsibility. Again, power issues can result from unclarified roles. think I need some more coffee. For example, so here's a one. It's been a couple years ago. I won't tell you what city it was, but it was a large Ohio city, and they had a neighborhood association, historic, wanting to preserve and renovate their area. And so I was invited in. I sat in this beautiful Victorian home, and we had these meetings and discussions. And then one meeting I wasn't there because they were doing some other board business, and I didn't need to be there for the planning of this historic association. And one of the board members, who was very influential, just blew up, and he went off on all the things that I had suggested, or that I asked them questions, facilitated a conversation to get them to think about it being more inclusive, diversifying the work that they were doing, and inviting neighbors that weren't always invited. Well, this guy didn't want that. So I came back to the next meeting. Oh no, I got a call from the board president, and he told me the whole outline. And I said, well, do you want me to come back in and have a conversation about this? And he said yes and no. So ultimately I did go back in. I addressed the issue of diversity and inclusion, and of getting outside of the way we've always done things. This guy did not attend. The other board members were in agreement, and they told me, I didn't get the full report, that they were leaning to try to push him out. And so, but man, power struggles are huge. Anyway, okay. Designating tasks. Oh yeah, so think about advisory board or a legally constituted board. Are the tasks clear? Do people really understand? How do you select members, again, for diversity, for community connections to the funding agencies? Do they have a specific area of expertise that you need? So when you're looking for members, you want to bring them in. I'm here again in Xenia. There's the county courthouse, the government buildings downtown here. There are a number of small businesses, there are nonprofits. How do we bring in people that will help us round out and understand the fullness of this community, where actually my extension office is about a mile up the road at the fairgrounds. So, how do we bring in the agriculture community, even though I'm in downtown Xenia? Additional criteria: are folks available? So just a week ago, not even, I was on a call with a friend who was asked me to be an advisor to their board, and it was a Zoom. This board is out in Minnesota, M-State, Minnesota, and it's a national nonprofit. They do a lot of work with community bridge building and diversity and inclusion. A really cool group. And they said that we've got this one board member who we love, but he never makes it. So it's something to think about. Anyway, what questions should you ask yourself if you've been invited? Do I believe in the mission? Do I have time? Do I have a conflict of interest? Do I have the background and skills? And why have they asked me? Is it because I'm loaded and I can donate money? There are boards that invite people because they want their money. Will my family be supportive? Do I have time to do that? I just put this picture in there because I love this board. It's disbanded now because this was our national diversity extension diversity committee, and we had conferences down in below Cincinnati, Hebron, Kentucky for 10 or 15 years. Such a great group bringing people together, and from this, a couple of national initiatives have spun off for extension. And it just, so it was just this beautiful board. I love these folks. I just put their picture in it. Conducting advisory committee meetings really quickly, and we'll wrap up. Use people's time well. Get a structured agenda. Send out reports before. Don't read reports during meetings. Only discuss them when you need to. Use virtual meetings. Efficiency is huge. Shift gears, and we'll wrap. 2 more slides. Partnerships. Think about partnerships for the advisory committee. How can you find collaborators, cooperators, and coordination? It can be really big, and it can really help you or your nonprofit, your group, your planning, program planning, whatever it may be. So how do you build and maintain those? This is absolutely a critical piece. For example, it requires training skills, constant attention, so that they don't get stale. You don't leave somebody on that advisory board for 20 years, for 8 years. It needs to rotate. Anyway, Extension has some great guidelines. Google those up. You can find them pretty easily. I'll probably have a link in the Carmen. Sorry about that. How do you get social media? This is just an aside, but it's really germane today, I think the last 20 years really. But crowdsourcing, one note I throw in here, because a lot of people will do that. They'll look to use social networks to crowdsource and structure communications or build relationships to get support, but that's very limited because our crowdsourcing, as we now know, the algorithms put us in touch with people who think like us, who look like us, who, whatever. So just remember, don't generalize. Be careful when you're crowdsourcing because of the algorithms. You're going to get what you get. Supplemental reading, pretty cool article, talks about Chris Zoller, good buddy, great extension partner or friend, and responding to citizens' request to develop a countryside parks department. This is years back, but it's still a pretty cool article, germane to the conversation. From Xenia, Ohio, have a great week, everybody.